Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast post-trade deadline show. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, we are going to break down everything since the last time we podcasted about 14 hours ago. That'll be the Brandon Ingram deal, the Mark Williams deal to the Lakers, and everything that happened on February 6th, 2025. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? I mean, they gave us the Jimmy Butler trade in the evening where we could go ahead and break that down, but then things just happened. I don't know what all time it went down. I know I was asleep and woke up to the Mark Williams trade, the Brandon Ingram trade. And then, of course, I was ready for everything else today, but they at least got the Jimmy Butler in early enough that we were able to talk about that last night, and then we can get through the rest of that stuff today.
Yeah, and look, like this ended up being a perfect split, I feel like, because the Jimmy deal's out of the way. We got to talk about the Kuzma thing as well, like that happened. And now we have this little runway here where, look, what happened today wasn't insane. I'd argue the biggest deal that happened today was the DeAndre Hunter deal, probably going to Cleveland. Certainly the deal that will have the most impact on the title race at the very least. So I wouldn't say there was like an enormous number of crazy moves today, but yesterday we got the real flurry, like the real craziness happened. And, you know, if you want our thoughts on the Jimmy Butler deal, we have done that already. You can go deep on the Butler deal with us. We talked about it for 35 minutes. That's just on the last episode that we recorded. So please, by all means, do that. By the way, if you're here, hit the like button while we're here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie, if you're listening over on the podcast feed, or if you're just here hanging out, having a good time, hit the like button. Okay, hit the subscribe button. Let's talk about, I want to start with the Mark Williams deal because I think it's like genuinely one of the more fascinating deals we have seen in the NBA in a while, frankly. So the Los Angeles Lakers acquired Mark Williams for Dalton Knecht, Cam Reddish, an unprotected 2031 first round pick, and a 2030 pick swap. That feels like a lot to me for Mark Williams. And there are a number of reasons why I feel that way that maybe I will talk about momentarily, but I will just give you the floor on this. Bryce, what are your thoughts on Mark Williams going to the Los Angeles Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about them needing a big. This felt like them calling around, looking for a big and getting one. I would be interested to know if Charlotte really wanted to move him. Like, obviously they were open to the idea, but to me, the return feels like, all right, you have to really give us what we want for us to turn loose of Mark Williams. I think my initial thoughts are, because I saw some reports that they even called the Pistons about Jalen Duren, which was interesting. I think offensively, this is exactly what Luka needs, this type of big. I think defensively, Mark Williams can contest shots. He does have length, all of those things. I don't know that he's the answer to make up for all of the weaknesses this team has on the perimeter. So I think this team can be really, really good offensively. I'm a little less sure what it ends up being on the defensive end. It seems like a lot when you talk about an unprotected, like this was something I was going to ask you before we recorded, like what was the best draft pick that got moved today? I would assume this unprotected 2031 first has to be close in terms of just the draft picks that got moved today. I know
probably not for me, honestly.
So I was just trying to think of all the first round picks. The thing that doesn't make it as enticing is the fact that Luke is there, right? So even in 2031, but it's still unprotected. So I don't know. It just was, I'd like to go through all of them. We don't, not on the, like, I want to go through all of them at one point, and just like see what was the best picks that got moved. But My initial reaction was that it just seemed a little bit steep for Mark Williams.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. It seems like a lot for Mark Williams. So full kind of disclosure. I was like gearing up to do a video on Mark Williams, right? Like I watched like 3 or 4 Hornets games and I was planning on doing a video on like the 38-point game he had against Memphis, right? And was like, okay, like let's do this, right? This will be fun. I'm glad to see Mark Williams, is playing well. He's dealt with a ton of injuries. He looks like a real dude for the Hornets, maybe just based off the box scores. And then I watched the tape. And the defense is really bad, guys. Like, he is so ineffectual in drop coverage. He is so ineffectual in terms of like rotating around the rim. He is like a 9'9" standing reach, and you just do not feel it. Like guys like Jonas Valanciunas just kind of plow through him a little bit. And like he dealt like in the Washington game, for instance, right? Like he kind of dealt with playing on Bilal Coulibaly where they were trying to like dare Coulibaly to shoot and then, have him kind of camping out, helping around the paint. And like he didn't really help around the paint. And then also just got like completely cooked out on the perimeter when Coulibaly had the ball. You look at the Memphis game where he had like 38 points. I thought he was like even worse in that game defensively. I thought he got absolutely destroyed in the first half of that game by like Zach Edey, by the driving guards from Memphis. I thought it was like really, really bad. And this is before we get to the games recently where like Nikola Jokic caught him for 28 and 17 assists. And Anthony Davis caught him for 42, where like a majority of those 42 were on him. I think that more than anything for me with this Lakers deal, it absolutely has a chance to work out. Like, I don't want to sit here and say like Mark Williams is like an ungifted basketball player because, he's averaging like 20 and 12 over his last like 10 games or whatever. And you can see how he's going to be a real fit with Luka Doncic. Like Luka Doncic is going to feed him like incredible opportunities in the dunker spot. Mark Williams isn't like a lob threat who's going to go up off of like 1 foot like Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively can, but he's so big that like if you catch him, like he's screening and rolling to the rim, he's able to at least catch and finish. He has good hands around the basket as well. I don't want to sit here and say like this is a no chance deal that like it's not going to work out for the Lakers. I absolutely think there is a world where it works out for the Lakers for sure. The reason that I personally would not have done this deal is that they had to give up a significant portion of their asset base. And we'll talk about Dalton Knecht here in a second, because I think that thing's actually interesting. And I actually kind of agree with their decision to sell early on Knecht. But giving up Knecht and the 2031 first and a 2030 swap, that's like all of their assets remaining in their tool chest outside of a 2028 swap and also Austin Reeves. And this is for a player that, oh, by the way, like we haven't even mentioned yet, he's played 84 career games in 2.5 years because he's dealt with like a left ankle injury consistently in his rookie year. He's dealt with a back injury as a sophomore. He's dealt with like a foot injury coming into this year, right? He's just a guy that deals with a lot of injuries and also has been quite poor on defense to this point. So I think it's too risky for this Lakers team, given what they have at their disposal, to utilize all of their assets, except for Reeves, really, on this bet is just not what I would have done, I guess. I'm not saying that there's no chance it works. I think that he is absolutely like a talented player, Mark Williams. But there are a lot of flaws here, and the opportunity cost, I think, is pretty real, depending on what could come available within the next 6 months.
Yeah, that's where it's interesting. I don't mind them going out and scouring the market and making a play for a big. I think what you brought up at the end is maybe the biggest thing in terms of the games. Like you're bringing in a guy who has had issues through his first 3 seasons staying on the court, and they need whoever they're bringing in to stay on the court and play, honestly, big minutes, not just a bunch of games, but big minutes in those games. And so I think I'm with you where it's not so much that they use the assets. It's that if they were going to use the assets, I would have wanted a little bit more of a sure thing. And then I also look at the roster and I'm like, okay, even if it works, I still kind of look at like the perimeter wing rotation, and it's still not that attractive to me once you get past that starting group. And so again, like I would have rather, like we talked about, is there a pack? And sometimes these things just aren't available, right? So it's easy for me to say, go find a package of a wing defender and a big, right? Like it's easy for me to say that and then not drop the two names that were actually available. I just would have been more intrigued by something like that. And putting all of these in for the big man, okay, even if it works, I'm still a little bit nervous about the wing perimeter room, again, beyond LeBron, Luka, Austin Reeves, etc. So it better work. Like that's the thing, is like, this is one of those where, okay, you pushed a lot into the plate. It better work out. He better stay healthy and he better improve defensively. Like whatever the issues were, you better feel good that you can fix them because of whether it's motivation or coaching or health or whatever. You better feel like you're going to get it. The other thing is you're going to have to pay him sooner rather than later as well. Like that's coming up very soon.
So I'll talk about that in a second too. So two quick answers on that, or two quick like things here before we get to that. Why do I think Williams is bad on defense? Because the other thing that people point to is like, oh, PJ Washington got out of the Charlotte situation last year and was great on defense for Dallas. Like Luka literally played with this last year, and Washington played a huge role in them getting to the finals. PJ Washington had shown like a real high level of defense in his second and third seasons in Charlotte that made you believe that he was going to be able to be okay on the defensive end somewhere else. Mark Williams hasn't really done that yet. On top of that, like PJ Washington's issues were largely kind of just like effort based. Mark Williams, like I think there's a difference between like effort and motor, kind of. Like PJ Washington like just didn't get back in transition all the time and was like kind of late on things because he just like was clearly, not engaged in what was happening. Mark Williams like is also a lot of the time like not really engaged, it feels like to me, but when I watch him, it feels like the processing is a little bit slower with Williams, whereas with Washington, like in big moments, you could see him scramble around and like he was moving around and was flying around in a really effective way. It's just that he didn't have anything to scramble for, kind of. In Williams's case, like if you get him out on the perimeter, like he has no chance in the playoffs this year, guys. Like I'm just telling you, like if they run into Nikola Jokic again, like Jokic is going to pump fake him into oblivion and like get him into foul trouble immediately, or he's just going to like continue to drive by him and like purposely not get him in foul trouble. He has so many different issues on the defensive end. I don't think his use of angles in drop covers is particularly good. I don't think his positioning is particularly good. His post defense against like bigger dudes, I feel like he just doesn't really know how to like use his chest yet in general on defense to like be strong. He uses his length. Like he understands that he has a 9'9" standing reach, but he often just like kind of falls too far backward. I feel like to where he doesn't get the most out of that as opposed to like really like holding his ground a lot of the time. So those are like real issues with Williams. Now,
let me build on that real fast, because I pulled up he's actually a player I did scout in that draft. And a lot of what you're saying is stuff that I had in my notes coming out of college. Ball screen defense has to be more sound with his coverage so he doesn't give up things he shouldn't. Playing too high, plays straight up, doesn't recover to the roll man, doesn't recover to the pick and pop. Off-ball defense, awareness is average, some major questions, doesn't react the quickest, but he does have insane length, slow off the floor. Post defense.
Bryce's post defense.
It's a lot.
There we go.
We back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. I don't know how much of everybody got of that. Essentially, it was a scout that built on everything you said about him so far this season as well.
Yeah. So, and again, like, I don't want to say that, like, this has no chance of working because he is extremely young. He's 23 years old, and he is a player that has like real genuine tools. Maybe it's a thing where like now the two coaching staffs in Charlotte just weren't really getting to him. Maybe it's a thing where the injuries have stopped him from getting the experience he needs to feel confident in his movements out there, and getting him time on the court will give him an opportunity to succeed. We want Mark Williams to succeed. Like, we're all for it. Like, from what I think his like parents are like doctors, and like he's this like really, really good kid from like the Intel pre-draft, at least. Like, we're all for Mark Williams being successful in Los Angeles. It's just that like right now there are real issues that he's going to have to work through in his game. And Shabugan, shout out for the super chat on YouTube here. Understand your calculus, but what was the alternative? Seems clear that Claxton, Kessler, and Turner weren't available. This was the best upside play. I just would have gone lower cost on the center position. I would have looked at somebody, I've mentioned Day'Ron Sharpe before as somebody that like they could have gotten probably for a couple of seconds. I think like even like Jericho Sims is not like a great player or anything, but I would have gone low cost. And the other option that I think was really at their disposal here was, I think that they're like 7 million above the luxury tax line, like somewhere in that ballpark, $7-ish million. I'm not totally sure what the exact number is. They could have done something similar to what Milwaukee did with Rui Hachimura, where you trade Rui for a guy that is like just way cheaper than Rui, and you send out like a pick swap or something like that, or like a second round pick or something like that, and you make it so you fall below the luxury tax. And I don't say this in terms of like, hey, let's make sure the buses get a bunch more money. The big thing that helps you there is that then you become eligible to sign buyout candidates that come available after the deadline, guys like Bruce Brown, maybe Clint Capella gets, bought out by the Hawks. I would have looked down that road as opposed to using like the assets to do that. Or frankly, I would have looked at moving Dalton Knecht in a different way, which, again, I do want to talk about in 1 second here. The last thing that I want to bring up with Mark Williams, you brought up the idea of an extension, right?
Yep.
And that you're going to have to pay him. I would assume, I'm not saying I know this, I don't. And maybe if Mark Williams is willing to sign an extension for under $18 million a year, which given his statistical production, I find like a little bit unlikely, but he's a guy again that has dealt with a lot of injuries, and maybe he just like wants to confirm that he's going to get paid. But unless Mark Williams signs a deal for under $18 million, which is where his cap hold is currently slated to be in the summer of 2026, I would guess that they let him go to restricted free agency, have an $18 million cap hold on their sheet, have Austin Reeves' $21 million cap hold once he inevitably declines his player option, have Luka's $51 million on their books, and then they'll have Vanderbilt and Bronny still on the books as well. With just those guys, they still have something like $50-ish million in cap space. They could move Vanderbilt pretty easily and be able to like have a full max cap spot for somebody else. I do think that Mark Williams fits really well into their salary situation, which is all leading to the summer of 2026, where the hope is that they'll be able to pry loose some sort of free agent. And oh, by the way, they now have a lot of leverage throughout the course of the next like 18 months, realistically 16 months, whatever it is, to be able to like exert a lot of pressure on other situations, such as like, okay, let's say like Milwaukee doesn't open super well next year, right? Hey, like, Giannis is going to leave in 2027, you better trade him. And Giannis wants to come to the Lakers. Like, any, client is going to try to get their players to the Lakers to play with Luka Doncic in a glamour market for like a team that is second in titles in NBA history. This isn't just like Laker exceptionalism, right? This is, oh shit, now they're selling Luka Doncic in Los Angeles. You get to live in Los Angeles. Like, that's going to be real pressure that is like passive pressure from the Lakers organization that is just going to be exerted league wide. at that point because of the amount of cap space that the Lakers are going to have and the flexibility they're going to be able to have to kind of try and make moves like this. So look, like I think that in that vein, Williams fits their planning, both short and honestly, I still think more longer term than short term because I still think their defense is going to be quite poor this year. But that piece of it is okay. The Knecht piece of it is interesting to me as well. What have you thought of Dalton Knecht this year? I guess I'll kind of give you the floor on this.
Yeah, so I want to real quick to finish off Williams. I do think it will work offensively. Like I do,
totally.
I do love that they went out, they identified what exactly Luka needs. Like it didn't take anybody a crazy amount of time to know that he needs a lob threat. And as you mentioned, like it's not maybe the same. Like he's maybe not crazy off the floor the way Gafford or Lively is or whatever, but the reach and the play finishing and all of that is still there. Like it's going to work offensively, in my opinion. Dalton Knecht. Obviously, I was very high on him. I would guess that if I put my board up against anybody else's, I probably had him higher than anybody else. You mentioned it, though. The defense just really hasn't grown. And he is a rookie, in LA, playing for the Lakers with LeBron and AD and all of this stuff. I had just continuously given him the benefit of the doubt because of kind of the path he took, being an older player, some of the programs he had to go through to get where he was. And I was like, okay, then he gets to Tennessee where, okay, now he's going to learn defense at Tennessee. Well, then they put all of the offensive load on his shoulders, and then it wasn't as important. So I am a little bit nervous. I don't know that I question whether what I thought about Dalton Knecht offensively, this may be a lesson learned just in terms of like, you have to be able to hold up on the defensive end, and buying whatever I was holding on to in terms of progress or growth once he got into the league was maybe false hope. Now we're halfway through his rookie season, right? Like this isn't the end all be all, but I think I was hoping for a little bit more. But again, I had him higher on my board than way higher than where he ended up getting drafted. I thought this was a great pick for the Lakers. So
yes. So like Dalton now, I like cashing in on him now while he still has value. I think his defense like maybe has gotten worse throughout the year. Honestly, teams have like kind of figured out they can attack him a little bit more consistently. On top of that, like there are also just a lot of moments with Dalton where like the coaching staff for Los Angeles get like visually frustrated with him. There's
the clip going around of JJ. Everybody's playing it where JJ's yelling at him about running a play for him. And I assume Dalton messes it up or something. And it's like, this play was for you and you didn't run it right. So,
right. And that's like before we get to the defense where like the defensive communication stuff, like the processing stuff is just not there. So I'm like pretty good with them moving on from him now. Like if I was them, I probably would have just like moved him for like a baseline first round pick if I could have. I don't know if that deal was on the market or anything, but I would have looked at something like that instead of this deal and then tried to go a little bit shorter on the market. Maybe I would have tried to move him and like Rui Hachimura for like a cheaper player that would have maybe gotten them out of the luxury tax and then made them a little bit more of a threat in the buyout market because part of the reason is that when you're in the luxury tax, you can't sign players above the mid-level exception that get bought out. So like Bruce Brown, because the Lakers are still in the luxury tax, not an option for the Los Angeles Lakers. Malcolm Brogdon, Clint Capella, these guys like can't be signed by the Lakers because they've signed elsewhere. So, because they have contracts more than $14 million or whatever the exact mid-level exception number this year is. So I think I would have just moved Dalton in a different way, maybe, than what they did. And really, like, again, this whole thing just comes down to opportunity cost for me. And that's really it. I think I would have gone about it in a different way than the Lakers. I hope it works out for them. Like I'm interested to see what they end up doing the rest of the year. I still think this Lakers team has like a really, really high upside offensively, especially now with Mark Williams, who, catches everything above the rim, can finish, like will be really, really effective in that respect. but Luka and LeBron, I think, are going to work really, really well together. I'm just really intrigued to watch this team. I don't love this deal, but it could absolutely work out. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise.
What are your thoughts the other way? I mean, the Hornets, talking about Dalton now on Charlotte. Yeah. I had somebody bring up him there. Like, he can go there. It's not as
they liked him pre-draft last year. We talked about that for sure.
Yeah. Go get some buckets for the Hornets. Brandon Miller is out for the rest of the season, so there's going to be shots available. Charlotte gets a unprotected first round pick and a pick swap. If Mark Williams wasn't the future of their big man rotation, then it seems like this is a really good return for that player.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good return. I have questions about Knecht, but going to get a 2031 unprotected first, I think, is a good pick, even though, the Lakers have Luka and would assume Luka is going to be like 30 at that point, like 31, I guess, 31, at that point. Yeah. He'd still probably be very, very good at basketball. But yeah, I think that that's a smart move. I think that, look, it just says a lot to me that they weren't willing to ride this out with Mark Williams. You know what I mean? Like, almost like the willingness to not ride out Mark Williams,
especially like when he was producing the way he's producing right now. I mean, what'd you say, 20 and 12 or something like that? I was surprised. Like, of the names that got moved, obviously the Luka thing stunned all of us. Like, this one surprised me, because especially after they traded Nick Richards, I didn't think there was any chance they were. And I realized the Hornets aren't in win this season mode anyway, so it doesn't matter if Diabate starts, has to start the rest of the season for him or whatever. It just, and I guess they have Nurkic now too, but I was not expecting that. Mark Williams was not a name I was expecting, and I still can't help but think that Los Angeles had to pay a premium on this because they went searching for names that weren't quote unquote on the market. Again, I'll reference Jalen Duren. Like, I heard that they called about him. Wasn't a name that was necessarily being shopped. So if Pelinka's calling around for names like that to actually pry that guy away, you're probably going to have to pay a little bit extra. And it seems like that's what they had to do.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I don't know that I need to say much more on this deal. Like, I think we're in a pretty good spot here, and I think that it's worth moving on to the Brandon Ingram deal in a second here. But first, shout out to the good folks over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. We love PrizePicks here at Game Theory because of how easy they make it to get real money sports action. The Super Bowl is this weekend. If you think Patrick Mahomes is going to go nuts, if you think Saquon Barkley is going to go nuts, if you think that the Eagles defense is going to be fantastic in this game, and you're going to hold Xavier Worthy down, going to hold Travis Kelce down, you can make picks based off of those thoughts in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Okay. Next up, let's go to the Toronto Raptors, who have acquired Brandon Ingram.
Why?
In a deal that, why is a good question. I'm sure it's just like a talent grab on some level. Like, Masai doesn't like to tank. He's been very clear about that. Not a fan of, just pushing the chips toward the losing side of the equation. They give up Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first and a second round pick to get Brandon Ingram. Before I start ranting, I'll just kind of give this one to you. What do you think of this deal?
This one was one I did not understand. I understood Mark Williams to the Lakers in terms of the need, the fit, the idea, all of that. This one, I didn't understand adding Brandon Ingram to a roster of Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quigley, and RJ Barrett. And including a Brandon Ingram that is an unrestricted free agent this offseason as well. So then you have to figure out, are you paying him? Are you not? I mean, maybe it all makes sense. Maybe this offseason they move on from Barrett and or Quickly or something like that and build around BI and Scotty Barnes. But giving up draft capital to get Brandon Ingram in a situation I don't think makes a ton of sense. And to me, it's even more than what they gave up in draft capital, because I assume you could have traded Bruce Brown for draft capital, and instead you used him in this deal. You don't think Bruce Brown had value on the market?
From what I understand, how big his contract is at $23 million was causing some problems.
Okay, even as an expiring, like
even as an expiring, just
okay.
like this year, it's like it's the same with Clint Capella, right? Like Clint Capella and Malcolm Brogdon, they're on these big contracts, right?
Sure.
And it's a little bit difficult to move those guys and like structure deals in ways that make sense, like across the board, right? Like the Lakers, for instance, like getting Bruce Brown. They could have done it. They could have moved Rui, but like Rui probably had to go to a third destination, and like you would have to figure out, okay, the Lakers can't take back more than they send out in a trade. So how do you make the salary work that way? Like it was more complicated than what
you were going to have to send out a player that was probably in your rotation, which then eliminates you wanting to give up a draft pick on top of that. Like,
correct.
Okay. So maybe that changes it a little bit for me, but I still don't understand Toronto feeling the need to do it.
Yeah. So just like, here's my issue with this. He's just very duplicative with what they have. Like Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickly, like all like to operate in that mid-range-ish, floater-ish area. And like Ingram operates in that area more than all of them do.
With the ball.
With the ball. And like he tends to be somebody that really likes to hold the ball, right? He will like catch and survey. He doesn't move it quickly. Everything for him is about like creating advantages kind of on his own, which is why it's a little bit hard to find like fits for him, particularly across the league. So the fit piece of it is tough on the offensive end. Defensively, I mean, he's just like not an impactful defender. He just never has been. And under Darko, like they've just not been a very good defense. They've been better since Scotty Barnes has been back. Barnes has like really, really lifted on that end recently, which is good. But, and like maybe getting Ingram and allowing him to like take on more of the offensive load will help Scotty be able to like continue to exert energy defensively. But like Ingram's not going to like help you on defense either. And like they're 26th in defensive rating this year. I think they were like 28th or something last year. They were really, really bad on that end. And also now they're 16 and 35 this year, right? And they've dealt with injuries. Like I get it. But like even when they've been healthy, they haven't been like an amazing team, right? RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, who they got for Pascal Siakam last year, they have a combined cap hit of $60 million. Scotty Barnes' extension kicks in next year. He's going to have a cap hit of 38.6. I mean, if they're going to keep Brandon Ingram, like that's going to cost at least $30 million a year. Like maybe more, maybe considerably more. Like could be like 38 or so to be able to get him to stay in Toronto. I don't know what his thoughts are on Toronto. You have Pirtle's $19.5 million. You have 15 million owed to Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji, and Grady Dick combined. That's $162 million for 8 players. The luxury tax next year is $188. They also have their first round pick, which will be like another 5 or 6 million probably, given where they are currently. That gets you up to like 167, let's call it, for 9 players. Luxury tax 188. And again, that's at 30 million for Ingram. If it's 40, you're at like 178 for 9 players. Then that gets really, really hard. You're already like to the point where you can't use your non-taxpayer mid-level. It feels like what this is setting up for is probably one of RJ Barrett or Emmanuel Quickly getting moved.
Yeah.
I would guess RJ's probably a little bit more duplicative, or they test out Ingram this cycle, like for the rest of the year, see what it looks like, and it either works or it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, then you just gave up a first round pick for nothing.
So do you think Masai thinks there is at least going to be a market for Brandon Ingram where a sign and trade is going to be the worst case scenario in this situation? And then
Possibly.
You'd get a couple months from Brandon Ingram, get a first round pick back in a sign and trade. And at least it was I guess essentially kind of a neutral type of thing.
I think it's definitely a bet on the Ingram marketplace being less, engaged than what you would think it is or what you would hope it is, maybe. But I don't know, like he's still a dude that has averaged like 23, 5 and 5 for the last few years. Like he's still going to probably make 30 from somebody, right? But then again, like we keep saying the somebody thing and we've never known who the somebody is with Ingram. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what we've been down this road. I don't need to continue to beat the dead horse. Like talented player. I think he's very talented, but it's hard to fit him into the right spot because it's like, okay, he's not a number one, obviously. Is that what you want your number two to look like? Okay, well, now if he's a number three, do you want to pay him that money or, even further down the, you know what I mean? Like to me, it's like it's what the Warriors are going to run into with Kuminga as well. Like these guys who are very talented, but their style of play, when it's not a number one option, or really a number two option that fits well off your number one, well, then can you pay that guy as a number three or like ask him to come off the bench and be that guy? Like they're almost too talented then for that role. They just end up in this really weird spot. And I feel like that's where I'm at with Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. Real quick thoughts on the 2026 pick that the New Orleans Pelicans got. I actually think that's not a bad pick to take a bet on.
That's the Pacers pick, right?
It's the Pacers pick next season.
2026, yeah.
The reason that I don't think it's crazy to take a bet on that pick is we've seen what they look like when Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt. And like none of us want Tyrese Halliburton to be hurt. None of us want him to play at a level like lesser than what we've seen him play at previously. I think Bryce and I are well established as like huge Halliburton fans in general. But there is an injury history with Halliburton worth considering. And if you're going to bet on a pick, I don't mind betting on that one and seeing what kind of happens there.
Yeah, no, I mean, my initial thought was, okay, Pacers first round pick, not super excited.
To be clear, this pick is probably like 15 to 22 in 2026, right?
But
like that's the most likely outcome here.
But to my point earlier, you feel like this pick is going to land higher than the Lakers in 2031 if you had to put money on it.
I would probably bet on that, yeah.
And it's going to happen 5 years earlier. So, right off the bat, we're one more trade into the conversation and we already found a better first round pick. So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad. Listen, I don't know what I thought Brandon Ingram was going to get, or what the Pelicans were going to get for Brandon Ingram. This feels like I think they did fine. Well. Yeah, like this feels a first round pick that's a real first round pick, right? Unprotected, real first round pick. You get the second. I don't know what they do with Bruce and Kelly Olynyk, but considering the situation they were in, I feel like this is probably good. Like not unreal, but good.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Just kind of looking through, like they got some 2025 second round pick there. I'm not totally sure what pick that was, to be honest.
I couldn't find it either.
Because I think that Charlotte had New Orleans pick. So I'm not sure like whose pick that is off the top of my head necessarily, but I'll try and look through while I'm vamping here a little bit. But I'm like very interested to see now like what New Orleans does and how they pivot out of this. They kept CJ. They, you know, decided to keep Zion for now. They obviously DeJounte Murray has the Achilles injury, so they're in a weird spot with that. New Orleans is in kind of a strange space, but like they went out and did, I think, the best that they could here with Ingram and like the Olynyk like move. That doesn't bother me. I think he's a good third big to have around when your main pick is Missy or your main center of the future is Missy.
Yeah, no, it's fine. He's under contract for another year. We've talked about this team having an issue at center. I mean, it's Trey Murphy season in New Orleans. That's what it is. Like the rest of this year, in my opinion, for them should be, let's find out how good is Trey Murphy. Like, let's put as much on his plate as we can. I know you did the break. Guys, you need to go watch it. Like, I was looking through our videos and the support has been incredible. The subscriptions are up. I know it's trade deadline. Trey Murphy has been cooking. Sam did a breakdown. Go check it out. And if I'm them, I'm pushing. How far can we push him? And let's find out where the breaking point is. That would be my number one data collection for the rest of the season if I was the Pelicans. And Olynyk probably helps that out in some ways offensively. Bruce Brown is fine, depending on what, maybe they end up buying him out and he's not even there. But that's what my motivation would be for the Pelicans is where can Trey Murphy end up slotting in on the pecking order of number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 options on a team and finding that out.
So final just thing here, right? Toronto's like direction here is ultimately what we're kind of talking about. Masai obviously does not like to tank. I understand like not loving the idea of tanking. They're already in 5th this year. It's going to be really hard for them, I think, to stay ahead of Brooklyn. It's going to be hard to stay ahead of Chicago. I mean, my God. Like they're probably sitting here most likely at like the 6th or 7th lottery odds under the best circumstance, even if they hadn't made this move. I don't mind the idea of being a little bit better. I'm just not totally sure what their like long-term plan is. Like I'm just trying to figure that out in my head. Is it just like collect all of these interesting-ish players and then like try to move them? I mean, it worked out once for Masai and he built a title team in Toronto, but is that kind of what you think he's trying to do here? Maybe
that's the only thing I could think of in terms of the talent is undeniable, right? On that roster in terms of Scotty Barnes, Barrett, Quickly, Ingram. Now you have some young guys in Grady Dick. I've talked about Jamal Shed on this podcast before. Pirtle is an interesting big. Like I assume like he's a guy that would have a market if they wanted him. Maybe that's what it is, right? Like you just acquire all of this talent and then I feel like I use this term or not, you a lot. You have to thread the needle, but if you thread the needle right when you start moving them, you can end up with a really good team, right? Like if you decide on the right ones to keep and the right ones to move, and when you move them, it's at the right time for the right players in return or draft picks or whatever it is, I think you can build something out. So I feel like I would be surprised if they're sitting there going, we love this core of Scotty, IQ, RJ, and BI. I would be surprised if that was their team building philosophy around those 4 guys. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think that's what it is.
And then like on top of it too, like the thing we've always talked about with Scotty Barnes, right, is if you're going to have him be your primary playmaker, you have to surround him with shooting, right? Brandon Ingram can shoot the basketball, but I wouldn't, he's just not like he's not a guy that likes to shoot.
He'll turn down more catch and shoot opportunities than he'll take to dribble into a mid-range pull-up, long mid-range pull-up, whatever. It's just how he plays the game. And people
totally.
Sometimes I get frustrated and it's nobody's fault. And it's just my personal philosophy. I think sometimes it's easy for people to say, well, you just talk him into taking more catch and shoot threes. I don't think that's how it works. Like guys are wired to play the game a certain way. They've wired themselves throughout their entire lives to play the game a certain way. Their jump shots and the energy and the flow and the rhythm has been wired off certain movements. And sometimes that's off a dribble and sometimes it's off a catch. BI is one of those players. To be honest, DeJounte Murray is another one where it seems like their jumpers are wired where the flow and the rhythm looks better when it's off the bounce than off a catch. I don't think it's just easy to flip a switch and say, hey, become a catch and shoot guy.
I agree with you. Okay. Let's go to the biggest deal that happened today.
Yeah, this was huge.
The Cavaliers get DeAndre Hunter for Karis LeVert, George Niang, 3 second-round picks, and 2 pick swaps.
Those pick swaps are very confusing now. So it's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I looked through them and I was like, I don't really want to continue looking through this anymore.
Yeah.
Interesting deal for the Cavs. I kind of love it, honestly, if I'm being real about this for the Cavs. And on top of it, they duck the luxury tax here, which means they have the ability to go out and get a big man that's bought out to fill that hole in the front court that you and I have talked about.
Okay, so
I
wanted to get it out of the way.
Fun move for me.
I wanted to get it out of the way real fast and be nitpicky that couldn't get a big in on this deal or somewhere else. So I will love it if they are able to do this, if they are able to bring in a center. And again, I know people always say no buyout player has ever made we're not looking for someone to go start on the Cavs. It's just like break glass in case of emergency. Mobley and Allen both have 3 fouls with 3 minutes to go in the first half, and you need somebody to come in and play 3 minutes or something. Listen, if they get the DeAndre Hunter of this season so far, this is a heck of a deal because, I mean, and the other, now they're pretty locked in money wise. I'm interested to see your thoughts on that because, but you move Karis, who was going to be an unrestricted free agent. Mm-hmm. I assume they feel comfortable with their backcourt because of Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill. I watched Craig Porter Jr. put a heck of a game together on Wednesday night against the Pistons. He looked pretty good. I'm a Craig Porter Jr. fan. So they probably feel like they have the guys there. Totally. Hunter essentially slots into Niang and is just, quite frankly, a better offensive player for sure. The way he's shooting the ball and all of that.
And frankly, a much better defender.
Sure. I think at times Hunter gets overrated or overvalued as a defender because
I agree.
He just physically looks the part and he's from Virginia. And it's like, I made this mistake of DeAndre Hunter, he's from Virginia. Look how athletic and strong he looks. I bet he's a really versatile defender. He's not that impactful defensively. So that's all I was really.
So the thing with Hunter is he's not that impactful off the ball defensively. He's not as quick rotationally as you want him to be. He's still pretty good and pretty strong and physical as a primary one-on-one defender.
Just at the point of attack.
Opposing players, at the point of attack. Yeah. Particularly against big wings. Yeah. What do I think of this? I think this is probably the right move for the Cavs because it fills a real gap for them, which is they needed a wing defender in some way, shape, or form. They needed somebody who can both defend and knock down threes. DeAndre Hunter this year has consistently knocked down threes. That is something that you have been able to trust him to do at the very least this season. And frankly, for the last 4, Hunter has hit 38% of his threes and taken 5 of them per game. This year, he's up to 7 per game. The volume is actually there. I think he understands a little bit more who he is now, maybe as a player, and he is kind of embracing being that 3-and-D attack closeouts when I can, as opposed to being oh shit, I want my touches in the mid-range and the mid-post to be able to shoot up over the top of guys, right? So I think that the fit is better here than Karis LeVert fits for the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's a big contract. It is also a contract that does not come without risk because DeAndre Hunter, tends to miss games, right? If you look through the history of his career, 2 years ago, he played 67 games. That's the most games he's ever played in the season. Other than that, 63, 57, 53, 23, and he's up to 37 so far this year. He does miss time. That is a real factor with this contract, and it's a big reason why the Hawks have struggled to find a landing spot for him over the course of the last year, despite him being on the market realistically for a little while now. So I don't hate them moving Hunter, the Hawks. I think this is a good fit for the Cavaliers. I also like the fact that they now have like real wing depth to be able to throw on opposing good players and like real lineup versatility and flexibility. So you have, for instance, right, Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, DeAndre Hunter, who can play all across the 2 through the 4 defensively. You can take Jared Allen out now and play small if you want to with Hunter at the 4. You can, take one of the small guards out if you have to. That'll hinder your offense substantially and bring Hunter in to play the 3. And then you have somebody at the 2, like a, Ty Jerome, Strus, whatever you want to do, depending on the matchup, right? So there are look, to me, this deal's all about what they're trying to do against Boston, right? Like we just saw this incredible game earlier this week where the Cavs like battled back against Boston. If you watch that game, Boston literally throughout the entire first 3 quarters, the whole thing was, we are just absolutely trying to get Jason Tatum or whoever, Jalen, switched on to smaller guards and take advantage of that mismatch opportunity. With DeAndre Hunter, as opposed to Karis LeVert or George Niang, you have limited the number of mismatches that teams can attack, and you've created more flexibility in your roster. On top of that, like, look, DeAndre Hunter's averaging 19 points a game, 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists. Like the passing's a real issue, but he shoots 46, 39, 86 from the field. Like he's a real shooter. He's an efficient player offensively. And the final note here that I will give is just like, his issue has always been, in terms of why the impact metrics don't really like him, that he's like a big 3-4 hybrid that doesn't rebound, right? Well, you have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley now to like help him rebound. Like they're going to be able to control the glass a little bit more effectively than what you would expect. So I feel okay with this deal as a whole.
Yeah, I don't mind them consolidating. We've talked about them consolidating. I was looking more for them to consolidate, wing guard, whatever, these guys into a big, but I'm okay with this because Hunter has been so good. And I was like you, there was part of me that's like, somebody's going to way overpay for DeAndre Hunter because he started out the season not the season, but when he started playing, scorching hot. And I'm like, that, but then I looked at the career stuff. And as you said, over the last 4 seasons, he's at 38% on almost 5 attempts. Last year, he shot 39% on over five attempts. And then you look at his playoff numbers, Sam, career in 16 games, 40% from 3 on 5 attempts a game, averaging 16 points a game. So like it's real. It's believable. It wasn't just like he was never going to stay on the scorching stretch he was on there to start, but it's legit upper 30s 3-point shooter. So I'm cool with it, especially if they're able to get into the buyout market and find a big to come in and just in case, foul trouble, a rolled ankle, need him for some minutes or whatever. I would like for them to round out their roster with that still.
So here'd be my question to you, as let's let Bryce put take analysis, like analyst hat off, and put guy who made NCAA tournament 2 times, college basketball player, like starter in the NCAA tournament hat on, right?
Okay.
You have a really good team in the Cavaliers who have won 40 games already.
I would not like this.
Clearly the best, team in the Eastern Conference right now, in the regular season, at least. If you were on that team, what would you think of this deal?
No, it would frustrate me. And listen, like I only have that hat of playing at a very high level of college basketball. Chemistry was everything on our team. And what all started it was the elimination of a player that was a culture drain. And we came together after that player was gone. And then we all came back the next year together. And yeah, obviously trades aren't allowed in college basketball, but if there was a trade made that took 2 of our guys away and brought in somebody else, it would have been tough. Now, college basketball is different than professional basketball. These guys are all through it. But we have noted this multiple times on the podcast, Sam, about how these guys seem to really understand their roles, thrive in their roles, accept them, all of that stuff. I have no reason to believe DeAndre Hunter will not accept his and understand his and get his, but it could be a thing that I don't know the answer to. The other thing I will say is, as a competitor, upgrading talent is upgrading talent sometimes. And if I was in that locker room and I didn't think we had enough talent to knock off the Boston Celtics, and I felt like this move gave us more talent to do so, then I would understand that also.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an important thing because like Jared Allen, I think literally did like a scrum after their game, I think against Boston, where they asked him like, trade deadline coming up, like, what do you think? And he said like, look, we think we have the guys in the locker room here to win. Like, we don't want anybody to get moved from this. Like, we love each other in this locker room. And DeAndre Hunter is like he's a, totally fine person to put in that locker room. Like, it's not going to be a problem or anything. But like George Niang's like an awesome locker room guy, like for sure. Like moving him, who knows what the effect is there. It's interesting to me, at least, that they made a move this big. But we've talked about this like throughout the course of their cycle here this year, that if they were going to get under the tax, they were going to have to move somebody big, and they had to get under the tax because this thing gets even more expensive next year with Evan Mobley's extension kicking in, especially with him having a chance at All-NBA this year, which feels like a distinct possibility at this point.
And I mean, to that point, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're the only one of the top 4 seeds in either conference to make like a big move, like a rotation altering move.
Yes.
Between the Eastern and Western Conference. Boston didn't, the Knicks didn't, Pacers didn't, nobody in the West did until you get past the top 4. So of the top 4 teams in each conference, 8 teams, they were the only one to really make a significant rotation move where like this is very impactful. I assume he doesn't start, but he's going to be their 6th man, first guy off the bench and play a major role.
I think that feels likely to me as well. Now, the other side of this is Atlanta, and I think that we should just take like their 2 moves in conjunction with one another, right? So what I've done here is like combined their 2 moves to just talk about Atlanta, right? And then from there, we'll transition into like the Clippers side of this and everything. But the Atlanta Hawks have traded basically DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovic, Cody Zeller, and 4 second-round picks for Terrence Mann, Karis LeVert, George Niang, Bones Highland, and 3 second-round picks. So like net loss of 1 second-round pick, Hunter, Bogdanovic, Zeller for Mann, LeVert, Niang, Highland. Off the dome, like what does that look like to you?
It seems wrong that they were that they were a negative in the picks selection. So they traded away the best player, right? Unquestioned.
In Hunter, yeah. I would agree with that.
They got
like,
back Bogdan has not been good this year.
That's the thing. Like Bogdanovic quickly became like a fairly negative asset for them, who has dealt with knee injuries throughout the course of his career. Now, what I will say is like, yes, Bogdan has dealt with knee injuries throughout the course of his career. Also, though, he's a guy that like literally just at the Olympics this past year, like with Jokic, like helped lead Serbia to a bronze medal, which led to some fucking incredible photos and videos. But I'm not like 1,000% convinced that he's washed. There's a chance, like there is a real shot that Bogdan is washed. Like he is older than what you think he is. He is a guy that just really continues to deal with like a bevy of like knee tendonitis kind of issues at 32 years old. He has a contract that like he has 17 million this year. He's owed 16 million next year, and then has like a team option, I believe, for 2026, 27. So like you're taking on extra money for next year to take his deal. that was like that was probably a negative value contract right now, given these 32 has knee issues and like is, a player that has like a, bad track record this season. But also you can see a world where it turns. To get Terrence Mann for him, even though you had to give up 3 seconds, it's like kind of an interesting play to me because he kind of replaces what Hunter does. He's not as effective offensively, but Hunter is a good on ball defender. Terrence Mann is probably a little bit better overall defensively than what Hunter is. He's a better team defender as a whole. I think he guards perimeter players actually a little bit better than DeAndre does too. It's an interesting like kind of switch to just go like Hunter for Mann. And then like LeVert for Bogdanovic is probably an upgrade there too, especially the way Karras has played, and you get off of the Bogdanovic deal. And then really you're just talking like Cody Zeller in a second for Niang and Bones at that point. Hunter is way better than Terrence Mann. Not way better, but Hunter is better than Terrence Mann. So like that is a piece of it. But I can like, I neither like nor hate this, I guess. Like I can see some of the logic behind it because it does really get them off of a lot of long-term money now with Bogdanovic. And these are guys that they've been trying to move for quite a while.
Well, and I feel like it continues to build out the roster in the way we've talked about, right? So they acquired Dyson Daniels, who has ended up being a great acquisition, right? Like has played really well next to Trey, defensively been awesome, figuring things out offensively with his cutting and all of that playing off of him. They draft Zach at the, number 1, this, rangy, ideally 3-and-D wing forward defender. We've talked about Jalen Johnson, unfortunately out for the season. Like you just add Terrence Mann now. Terrence is the one that I feel like is long-term going to stay in Atlanta. One, he's on a longer-term contract where Karras is an expiring deal. So Karras keeps things afloat this year. Like I think that does help, especially like he's better right now than what we've seen from Bogdanovic, as you said. But Mann is interesting because you just add another one of those guys to the roster where it's like, okay, Trey's at the point, and we'll just keep acquiring these wing defenders, cutters, some of them floor spacers. We'll eventually figure out our big man, whether it is Onyeka or somebody else. So in that sense, it does make sense. It's just hard because when you look at the names, DeAndre is definitely the best player. Olympics, Bogdan might be the second best player, but this season Bogdan isn't. And so then whenever you take negative seconds for all of that, it just kind of looks funny until you really get into the weeds on it, I guess.
Yeah, like LeVert has been a better player this year than what Bogdanovic is. Like,
Agreed.
There's just not really
no question.
Yeah, like he just has been, right? But I don't know, man. Like it's just like it's just rearranging, chairs on a ship, right? Like the ship isn't the Titanic, but like it's just you're moving around chairs to me with these moves. And you get to keep Niang for a year. Again, Niang's like a really good shooter who will be a good bench player for them, I think. Quinn Snyder tends to like really smart players. I think that Niang is certainly a very, very, very smart player and will fit really well offensively with what Quinn Snyder wants to do. Mann has like not been great this year. Like we can call that out as well. I don't know. It feels like he just kind of got lost in the shuffle with the Clippers. He is still just like a 28-year-old who's a good defender and who can at the very least like knock down shots occasionally, right? He's not going to take a ton of them, but he moves the ball quickly. Like I think that he could very easily be an effective player. And then like Roy says here in the comments, like this year when Trey left the court, like the offense just completely fell off of a cliff because Bogdan had, been injured and then like was not playing well. I actually kind of wonder if Karras helps them like more than any of these other guys kind of do. And then, just final like note here. They obviously don't have their pick this year. Like San Antonio has their first round pick unprotected and San Antonio kept that pick. So like, they're not trying to tank. Like they're not trying to be worse here. I don't know that they're worse necessarily with these moves. And I think that's probably why, like, they targeted the players that they did is because, they still owe San Antonio this year's pick, the 2027 pick, right? So there's not really a reason to tank either here.
Yeah, that my initial thought as the moves were coming through was I did think they were going to be worse for the rest of the season. It's like, okay, well, they're going to punt on things a little bit with Jalen, but without the pick, it doesn't make any sense. When you look at it right there, as it's all kind of broken down, it's not as bad, right? Because like you said, Karras is the second best player on that list this season. And honestly, Niang's probably been better than Bogdanovic this season, like straight up based off what, I mean, Bogdanovic is like at 30% from three right now. So
no, he's been like really bad.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like really, really egregiously bad.
I hope he figures it out because I love that Clippers team and they could use a little bit of that juice off the bench, which we have talked about all season with them. And I assume that's what they're taking a bet on. But yeah. Karras makes a lot of sense for Atlanta for this season.
Yeah. And like Ben brings it up in the comments, like it felt like this deal was more about tinkering with the bench, like between, Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Zachary Rissache, and Jalen Johnson. Like they have the core group already, right? Like they know that those are the four that they're building around. And now you're just trying to like mix and match to see, okay, what works on the bench, what works here, what works there. I think that is generally what this is. Why did Houston trade for Cody Zeller? Because they got a second round pick out of it. That's the answer there. They got 2 second round picks for being willing to take on Springer and Cody Zeller. Like that's just like decent value to me. Anything, I mean, the Clippers here, it really is just like dependent on what they get out of Bogdan, in my opinion. That's really all that this is about. If Bogdan is good, then this deal will make sense. I will say if Bogdan is good, it also gives them the flexibility to potentially move Norman Powell maybe in the offseason, like cash in high on him and then move him. And then like maybe Bogdan steps up and you cash in high on Bogdan next year, right? Like you might just be like trying to like chip up your assets a little bit. You got 3 second round picks in this deal as it is for Terrence Mann. I don't hate any of this from them. It's just like, it's going to be dependent on if Bogdan can get any way near back.
I mean, when you just look at their points, Powell's at 24, Harden's at 21. We've talked about them. Kawhi's, we'll see if he rounds into shape. Zubac. But then you look off the bench, Amir Coffey started 11 games, but averages 10 points. Highland only played 20 games. Terrence Mann, 37 games, 20 minutes a night, 6 points a game. Like the point being the scoring goes down very quickly whenever you look at this Clippers team. They've tried Jordan Miller. They've tried other guys. And so it's just like, I think I understand what they're shooting for here is like, if you get Olympic Bogdan, all of a sudden that's kind of interesting with that guy coming off your bench with what you have in the starting lineup when Kawhi is healthy.
Yeah. Okay. Next spot. Where do you want to go next, Bryce?
Let's look.
Should we just do the Suns thing now?
Sure. Get it over with.
And just talk about like what the fuck happened here. So the Suns move today was to trade Yusuf Nurkic and their 2026 first round pick, which is like not a good first round pick, super, super highly protected. I believe I had it up on my screen a second ago. I'll figure out exactly what the protections are as Bryce is talking, but it's like a super, super protected first round pick. Not one of the picks they got in the Utah deal either. It is like a separate pick that they were then able to move because they got the picks in the Utah deal for Cody Martin, Vasa Micic, and a second round pick. And I believe that second round pick is also a 2026 second. Yeah. And I think that pick is like, I think it's like the worst of Golden State or Denver. So basically, like to get off of the Nurkic deal, they get Cody Martin back. Micic is like not an NBA player, it seems like, frankly, based off of his play in Charlotte. They get a chance on Cody Martin, who's like an interesting defensive wing. And they slide down like probably 25 spots in the draft from a late first to a mid to late second just to get off of Nurkic. Honestly, like I expected the price tag on that to be worse for them. So in a vacuum, I don't hate it, but it can't be taken in a vacuum with all of the shit that happened over the course of the last month, where they tried desperately to get Jimmy Butler, where Bradley Beal is getting his name thrown into trade rumors every single day, where Kevin Durant got his name thrown into trade rumors over the course of the last week. Like, that locker room can't be pleased. They have to know that there's no faith in them from the front office at this point, because all they've done is move Yusuf Nurkic for Cody Martin. It's not like they've gone out and like acquired real talent, right? And they've put all of these guys on the market recently. And on top of it, they did the 3-for-1, first rounders thing, where they got the 3 terrible first round picks that are like almost assuredly 22 or worse than the first round for an unprotected 2031 first round pick. All of this is just like batshit bananas bonkers. And look, like, we have Dallas this year, and Dallas certainly handled the deadline worse than Phoenix is. At least Phoenix didn't trade Devin Booker for, like, I don't know, Mikal Bridges or something. But, like, it's just like crazy to me that this is where we're at with Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, when you're already at an asset shortage and then you have to use one just to get off a contract, that just seems like a really bad place to be in. I was kind of like, I don't know that Cody Martin actually ends up helping them or not, but I was kind of surprised they got something back in that deal and the second round pick. So again, it's not just a straight first round pick. At least it's only essentially moving down how many ever spots that ends up being. It's just, it seems a really bad place to be in. Again, whenever you don't have the assets to go do the things you need to do, you're setting at 500 as we record this, 10th in the West, and you try to make moves. You asked me about locker room, right?
Yeah, and the players basically got a vote of no confidence from the front office here, and then all of them stayed.
So that's what I was going to say is, you asked me about like the chemistry of a locker room whenever a move happens. I think the only thing worse is like, oh, coach comes in, Bryce, we're going to, or whatever you see on social media, you're going to get traded or they're looking to move you or whatever. And then you stay in the locker room. Like, how does that work? Like, where's the confidence? Where's the chemistry, whatever there. So it will be a fascinating team to watch moving forward, because they literally they added Nick Richards, right? I mean, that's what we got from them. And I guess Cody Martin, and if they get anything from him. So it, not a great deadline for them. Did not execute, I guess, what they probably were trying.
So I will say this, like, they've gotten entirely off of the Nurkic money now. Like, they've Cody Martin has a year next year that is like fully non-guaranteed, I believe. And then Mitsic is a team option. And like, I think there are already rumors about him going back to like Europe, seemingly, potentially. That's based off of reporting that I've seen, not like public reporting that's out there, not based off of my information. I'm not saying that that's happening, based off of what I know. Honestly, like, they're not that far off from getting out of the second apron if they really wanted to this summer. Like, basically they're a Grayson Allen move away from being able to get off of that money if they want to. So
I mean, it's only the big three: Grayson, Royce, and the 2 rookies. Right? I mean, yeah, even Nick Richards is non-guaranteed. Cody's non-guaranteed. And then all the, like, Plumlee, Jones, all of these guys are unrestricted free agents.
Yeah. So like, I'll do some quick math while we're talking here, but like, do you think this team has any chance the rest of the season now, based off of like what we've seen?
Not a real chance. Like, they may stay in the play-in, but you look at the teams directly behind them. Well, let's go in front. So you do have the Mavericks in front of them. We'll see how that all transpires with AD and all of that. But then you have the Kings. You and I both kind of agreed that they didn't get a lot worse, if at all, with their move for the rest of this season. I know it didn't look great last night in the debut. And then directly behind them, you have the Warriors, who just acquired Jimmy Butler, and the Spurs, who just acquired De'Aaron Fox. So it's not going to be easy to even stay in there. And I don't think they're making a move out of the play-in. Like, I don't think they're getting into the top 6. So, no, I don't think this thing is going anywhere this season.
So I just did some quick math. So for Durant, Beal, Booker, Allen, Royce O'Neal, Nick Richards, Ryan Dunn, Oso, that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players. They're at 198 million next year. The second apron threshold is at 207. So realistically, they probably can't get below the second apron unless they move one of Grayson or Royce O'Neal. But they probably could if they wanted to move one of those 2 players, and that would give them like flexibility long term. Now, they're only so flexible as long as Bradley Beal is, well, like, just wants to stay there, right? And they are limited in that regard. But like moving Nurk, like, it was definitely worth what they moved to get off of Nurkic to like set themselves up for next year, I think.
I just, it's so hard. The idea of attaching a first round pick just to get off money like that when you're at a shortage is so hard for me to handle, Sam. Like, it's just, you made the move where maybe the best asset going around the NBA, as some call it, the 2031 unprotected, to get your 3 firsts. And I know it's not directly one of those. You may have traded away a better first round pick with trading your own than one of those. I don't know. It's hard to stomach that. And it just kind of speaks to the position they're in terms of draft assets and contracts and, quite honestly, roster construction outside of 2 really, really good players in Durant and Booker. But as we were talking about a second ago with like Jonathan Kuminga and what do you pay a guy to be a 6th man or third, you're paying Bradley Beal $50+ million to be your 6th man off the bench. And there's just no way you're going to build a title contender with that on your books. Like, I just don't understand how you make that work.
Yeah, no, I think that you're probably right about that. It's just going to be a tricky situation to figure out for them. Look, the process here was totally wrong. Giving up these 3 first-round picks, or getting these 3 first-round picks for the 2031 unprotected, is just like crazy. Especially when you don't have a deal in place. The process here is just really bad. There's not another way to say it to me.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Next team worth discussing here, and maybe this is where we can just get into like, let's do a quick thing on Memphis here, just because it's probably worth doing that. And then after that, we'll kind of just zoom around and talk about winners and losers maybe. So I've seen a lot of people like very frustrated with what Memphis did here. They moved Marcus Smart to, let's get this right. It's like a 3-team deal where they moved Marcus Smart to Washington and moved Jake LaRavia to the Kings. They gave up their 2025 first-round pick to get off of the Smart deal, basically. And they take back Marvin Bagley and Johnny Davis. They get a 2028 second-round pick back, and they get a future second-round pick back. I don't love them giving up LaRavia. I will just like kind of blanket that piece of it. But I do think that they probably made the best of a bad situation here with Smart. I think that keeping him at this point would have just continued to compound bad decisions at the end of the day. Like, you gave up 2 first-round picks in Trey Jones for Marcus Smart. You can't take that back, right? Like, you can't sit here and say, oh yeah, like we, should keep betting on this because we did this once already. That's how Chicago has gotten in trouble. They keep doubling down on their bad decisions, right? At some point, you just have to kind of cut the cord and say, we made a bad call here. We just need to move on and get as flexible as we can. That's what this deal is about for me, with like the Grizzlies just taking Bagley and Johnny Davis back and hoping it all, works out. Because what this deal now sets them up to do is retain Santi Aldama, retain Luke Kennard, and still have potentially their full non-taxpayer mid-level exception next year, which is an enormous like win for them as a whole. Because my guess is that signing somebody to that non-taxpayer mid-level exception next year will probably be valuable or more valuable than what Marcus Smart was. And they have enough depth to be able to account for losing Marcus Smart anyway this year. The Laravia piece of it, like I don't love moving Laravia. I think he's actually been pretty valuable for them. But the Smart side of it, like at some point you just got to, move on from a bad decision to me.
That's what I was going to say. You know what helps stomach bad decisions? When you've made countless other good decisions and your roster is still flush with talent because you've either drafted or acquired all of Zach Edey, Sante Aldama, Jay Huff, Scottie Pippen Jr., Gigi Jackson, Jalen Wells, on down the line. And again, whether you drafted them high, drafted them in the second round, picked them up on a two-way, whatever it was, like all of those correct decisions, not to mention the guys at the top, right? Like their best players. I guess I shouldn't gloss over those guys because you have the stars as well. So it isn't great process. Like we shouldn't like just let it pass because having to use a first round pick to get off of Marcus Smart isn't great process, but they can make it work. And if this is what they have to do to keep those guys who have played really well that they have acquired, I guess I understand it. I'm actually cool with Jake LaRavia getting moved in terms of like, I think Jake LaRavia going to the Kings is probably what's best for him. I assume he was going to get squeezed out of that rotation as Gigi Jackson is back, as Vincent Williams is back. I think he goes to Sacramento and probably slots into their top 10 relatively easily. And so I think he gets a consistent rotational spot there in Sacramento. So I think for him, it makes a lot of sense. And I think for Memphis, it probably was a guy they weren't going to prioritize after they didn't pick up his option anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, like Sacramento's top group is going to be Levine, Sabonis, DeRozan, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray. Like I would assume that's what they start.
Yeah.
Jonas comes off the bench. Trey Lyles comes off the bench. I mean, and Keon Ellis comes off the bench in the backcourt with Devin Carter. Like they don't have a backup three, man.
Yeah.
Really. Like it's Doug McDermott. It's Jay Crowder. Like, and even so, like I think there's pretty decent case that LaRavia is better than Trey Lyles. So I would imagine that he comes off the bench and just like plays for them pretty early.
And again, like for that reason, I think it's a good situation for him because now he's solidly in a rotation where his minutes should be somewhat consistent. Where again, in Memphis, and this is to their credit, they may play 11 dudes in a given game because they got to get minutes to all of these guys. And that was before Vince Williams. I believe he has played he's returned for one game or something like that. So, yeah, it's crazy what they've done. And eventually you have to start paying those guys. So process, not good, but you can figure it out whenever you've done a lot of other really, really smart moves along the way.
Yeah. And like, if you want to complain about, giving up 2 firsts and then having to give up like another first to get off of Smart, right? Like you're 100% valid in those complaints. I don't want to sit here and tell you otherwise. You're absolutely 100% correct to say that. I just don't think it's worth compounding a bad decision with like another bad decision. And I think, frankly, this is a good decision for Memphis to move Smart at this point. It just is a deal that makes it's a choice that makes a lot of sense for them, in my opinion, given their current roster situation.
Yep.
Okay. Let's go to just like brief winners and losers here of the deadline. So we spent a lot of time talking about Mark Williams in the Lakers early in this show, right? The Lakers are the biggest winner of the deadline. Like something close.
I mean, this was going to be my first one because they're the only team that acquired a top 5 player in the league. So regardless of anything else, they got the best player over the last how many ever days.
Correct. Like I've no idea how that deal happened. Still, it makes no sense to me. The Lakers could totally screw up whatever else they did at deadline. I don't think they totally screwed up. They just made a deal that I have questions about with Mark Williams. Doesn't matter. Like their margin for error now is enormous moving forward for the next 7 years because they have Luka Doncic.
who's 25, right? Like that's the other point. You got a top 5 player that's in his mid-20s, and you just extended, especially for an organization whose stars were 40 years old and 31 years old. Like you were able to take this window that was starting to close and completely blow it wide open again with this level of talent. Does it work or not? I don't know. Maybe he won't keep his body in shape and he has 3 more good years and all of that reporting, and we look back and whatever. I'm not counting on it, but you do this trade 100 times out of 100, and they're the only team that acquired somebody with that level of talent.
Second winner here is the Spurs for me. The Spurs going out and getting De'Aaron Fox for what they paid for Fox is just like a huge win. They traded 2 first-round picks that likely were not going to transfer as first-round picks, and then 2 other first-round picks that are just not their most valuable picks to give up. They gave up the 2031 first rounder from Minnesota, where Anthony Edwards still is. His deal obviously expires by then, but like given the extension, culture that the NBA currently lives in right now, I would imagine that Anthony Edwards is probably, I wouldn't say likely to extend in Minnesota, but like there's at least a pretty decent chance that he's going to be there. So that 2031 first is like good, not amazing. And then they gave up their own 2027 first when they're going to have De'Aaron Fox and even better Victor Wembanyama.
And who knows who else that they
who else, and like a more developed Steph Castle, maybe a better Devin Vassell. Like you just don't know, right? So like this deal is just a home run.
And they gave a pick to the
more I think about it.
As you mentioned, they gave a pick to the Bulls that wasn't going to convey this year anyway. It doesn't look like. So, yeah, I don't know.
They did well.
They did well. Yeah.
And like, I'm someone who has like questions about Fox. Like if he would have gone somewhere else, like if he would have gone to Houston or something, like I don't think he probably would have been worth the 165 deal that, Houston might've had to give him or Miami might've had to give him. Right. But in that spot with that player and Victor Wembanyama, who fits De'Aaron's game perfectly, I think that's like a home run of a deal for San Antonio.
Sorry, I think I said the Chicago thing wrong. I was thinking from Chicago's side, getting that. I was transitioning to losers. Chicago getting that first round back whenever they were going to keep it anyway was, no, I said it right. No,
you said it right the first time.
Yeah. I'm talking myself in circles. The funny thing about this is I wouldn't call the Kings winners by any means, but I don't hate what they ended up doing in all of this either. So,
yeah. Okay. Next. I just did like a blanket group of the sellers, right? So like, I think Miami did reasonably well for Jimmy, as we talked about, like given the way that he completely tanked his value on the way out. Like I think they did as well as they could have getting Wiggins in a first, right? And, Kyle Anderson and other stuff. I think New Orleans did well, like we talked about earlier, getting a first that I think is like a decent bet, plus Bruce Brown, plus Kelly Olynyk, plus the second. I think Washington did really well. Like you mentioned, you turn the Kyle Kuzma deal, Kyle Kuzma's in the middle of his career worst season probably, and you get Chris Middleton, who you might be able to flip next year, AJ Johnson, a 2028 first round pick swap. You get the first rounder from Memphis now that you just acquired, right? You get everything that you mentioned earlier with Washington. This front office has done a really good job. Like it's going to come down entirely to how they evaluate players, right? Because the way they have built is through draft prospects and through continually accumulating draft capital. Everything's going to be about, does this front office actually evaluate players well? By and large, I think that they do a really good job on the margins in situations like this and set themselves up to have a margin for error in those evaluation decisions, which is a good note to have for them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is they've at least picked a path and they've taken that path. It's a bunch of young players. It's a bunch of draft capital now. And now you have to figure out how to build it back out. Can you draft the right guys? Can you develop the right guys? When the time comes to move a couple for the next player or whatever, can you make the right decisions? And so it seems like they've done this part well in terms of that. Now to me, it's kind of the hard part now is as you start to draft these guys and develop them and put them together, that's when it becomes more difficult and they're going to have to figure that part out.
Okay.
Charlotte also, right?
Like your winners. Yeah, you mentioned Charlotte. That's a good one.
Nick Richards for the picks. They took Nurkic.
Utah, I think, got like 5 second-round picks just to like rent out some space, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Detroit like crushed it. The one thing I will say about Detroit is I think they netted 2 second-round picks and Dennis Schroeder, who like feels a need for what they need going down the stretch of the season. So like, I don't think it's like a home run. I wouldn't call them like big winners, but I think they did fine with the situation they were in.
Those feel like your big winners, right? Golden State, I think I would have on the winners column.
Yeah, I mean, again, you get Jimmy Butler.
And the more I think about the Butler thing, the more I think that like it does make sense because we talked about this last night. Obviously, if you want our Butler thoughts, like, you know, go back 14 hours ago, 15 hours ago now, maybe. The big thing for them is like, they finally have like, instead of doing like the 2 timelines thing, they're still in the middle of that a little bit. But with Curry, Green, and Butler all expiring at the same time now in 2027, you have like real clarity, at least, on what this era is. This era ends in 2027. Sure.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the situation. Then you're rebuilding probably. Do you use some picks? Because they have all of their picks now as soon as the 2025 draft happens again. So do you use your picks in order to try and augment this core? Or do you just kind of try and continue to rebuild moving forward and play the 2 timelines thing? They at least have like a real shot to be successful a little bit. I'm pretty good with this deal. And I think Jimmy's like an amazing fit in this Kerr offense. I get that people are, you know, being like, oh my God, like Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler, how are they going to figure out how to play together? Who cares if they both don't shoot? They're both like incredible off-ball players who are incredible screeners, who are incredible like at doing everything other than shooting on the offensive end of the floor. Like they're going to have such a more like those split actions that they run. They're going to be so much more dangerous now that it's Jimmy Butler and Steph and Draymond running them, as opposed to like Kuminga running them with Draymond and Steph. Right. I just, like, to me, the issue is like Kuminga. Like, I wouldn't pay Kuminga now if I was them, but I also understand that they think he's really good, and I have more questions about him than others do.
What about Philly? I think we thought the Quentin Grimes move was interesting and worth taking the shot on a guy that can make a lot of sense next to Tyrese Maxey. And then you mentioned you even thought the little essentially pick swap situation that happened with them and Washington, right? Where a first went out for multiple seconds. You actually thought Philly did okay in that move as well.
I did. Yeah. So the Quentin Grimes thing, they get just a better player in Quentin Grimes for Caleb Martin, and they get off of Caleb Martin's money. Getting off the Martin money allows them to have like real flexibility to potentially bring back both Grimes and Gershon Yabusele next year. On top of that, the deal that they did today, they have like an incredibly non-valuable 2026 first round pick at their disposal that was like the least favorable of Oklahoma City, Houston, and the Clippers. So like it was going to be the 28th overall pick or something next year. And they turned that into 4 second round picks, which, by the way, the Sixers were like a pretty depleted team and like second round pick flexibility for trades. And 2 of those picks are, well, I think 3 of them actually are Golden 2 of them are Golden State picks. I think there is like a 2027 pick that's Golden State and a 2028 pick that's Golden State. Again, we just said that like all of Curry, Butler, and Green expire in 2027, and they're going to be quite old by then. I would bet at least that 2028 pick is going to be a top 40 selection for that Golden State pick. And then I think that one of them is Phoenix's 2030 pick. And I would bet that probably projects as like a top 40 selection given their situation right now. Basically, I think that like Philly got 2 to 3 top 40 picks plus an additional second round pick and flipped Reggie Jackson into Jared Butler. And I think Jared Butler is just better than Reggie Jackson. I kind of like that deal for them. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, a team that like them, who goes in with 3 stars because we know this is what Daryl Morey's going to do. You have to then win on the margins, right? You have to win flipping Martin for Grimes. You have to win Reggie Jackson for Jared Butler. You have to win trading a first round pick for these multiple second round picks and then draft the right guys there. And, we'll see if they do or not, but it seems like they've set them up to maybe take some wins on the margin. So again, not like at the top of my list, but just as I scroll teams, it's like, okay, they did some interesting things.
Yeah. Okay. Like losers now, I guess. Like we didn't love what Toronto did. I don't know that
I did not
full scale call them like losers necessarily. The Bucks, like it's hard for me to completely hate what the Bucks did, if only because they got out of the second apron and like they just desperately needed more flexibility. But I think that there's like a downgrade from Middleton to Kuzma, even though Middleton, has continued to struggle to consistently play more than 25 minutes a night. The real losers here, though, like there are 3 to me. Do you want to take a guess?
Can I say 2? The Suns and the Bulls are 2 of the 3.
Yeah, and then Dallas obviously is the 3rd.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. We haven't talked about the Bulls yet. So like let's focus on them. We've talked a lot about the Suns. Like we did like a whole like what the fuck are the Suns doing section a second ago. There's this old saying in poker, like if you've watched the movie Rounders, you've seen it before. Like
I have seen.
If you can't spot the sucker at the poker table, that means the sucker is you. Right? I feel like every time the Bulls do a deal, they can't spot that they're the sucker at the poker table, basically. And they don't even often do deals. Like somehow they're sitting here with a fucking roster that is Nikola Vucevic still being on the team after he did everything he could possibly to have rehabilitated his stock this year. He's averaging like 20 and 10.
It'll never be higher. Never be higher.
It's never going to be better than it is right now. And still, they have him on the roster somewhere between 4 and 6 point guards, depending on how you categorize like Ayo Dosunmu or somebody like that, right? Or like Talen Horton Tucker's like a pseudo like on-ball guard, I guess.
Javon Carter.
Yeah, Javon Carter is still on this roster. Like
Trey Jones, Kobe White, Lonzo,
Josh Giddey, like
Josh Giddey.
What is this? Lonzo is still on this roster. He's a point guard. Like what are they doing? Because if you were going to go down this road and tank in this way, right? Because essentially that's what this is now. Like they won't come out and say it. And by the way, Arturas has some fucking beauties out of his press conference, I guess. But like, even if you won't come out and say that you're going to lose games, this team's going to lose a crazy amount of games the rest of the year. If that's what's going to happen, why do you need to trade for your first round pick back as your value add for Levine?
Yeah. When you're going to keep it anyway.
You're going to keep it anyway. It's not going to matter.
So you got
you
nothing.
Want to get off Levine? Like it's fine. Like if you just want to get off of Levine, okay, sure. Like that's fine. But like he's pretty good. And you have like no real plan, it feels like here. I just
the best move they made was the Lonzo extension. Like that's a good contract. That's the best thing they did. They didn't move Vooch. Like you said, they essentially got a pick back that they were going to tank to keep anyway. They're 8 games under 500 right now. The Sixers are 1 game back already. And so, I mean, the only reason they're in this is because the play-in in the East is so dreadful right now.
Arturas Karnisovas at his press conference today The next 30 games will determine if we will be in the play-in or the playoffs. This is something that is achievable, and our guys are capable of getting there. I'm sorry, what now? There's different structures that you can try to get to a championship. There's 2 to 3 star players and then a lot of role players, or you can build it as 9 to 10 very good players. What team in NBA history has won with 9 to 10 very good players on their team?
That's a good one. That one's nice.
I just am so flabbergasted.
Someone should ask him when he's going to start adding good players then, because right now they have like 3.
Yeah, like truly, like how many? Not many on this team.
Like Kobe's really good offensively.
But like I might have tried to cash in on him at this deadline. He's a year and a half left before he's an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, because like Kobe has hit our like best contracts in the NBA the last couple of times, and that's about to change. I like Io.
Yeah, but like he hasn't had a monster year this year. Patrick Williams is not very good.
Not good.
Lonzo's good, but like Lonzo can only play 20 to 25 minutes a night at best, it seems like. Herter's been pretty bad this year. Collins has been pretty bad this year. Trey Jones has not been very good this year.
Yeah, backup
he's been fine. I shouldn't say that. Like Trey Jones has been good this year. He's just a backup point guard.
Yeah.
Right. Giddey hasn't been what they hoped he would be. Like Modest is turning the corner. It feels like a little bit. Like he's been okay recently, but still like not a great player, I would argue.
And as good as Vooch is offensively, he's a liability on the defensive end.
Totally.
And he's 34 years old, having a career year shooting the ball that you just don't think is going to stay.
Yeah. The Bulls are the most dumbfounding team in the NBA to me at this point. I don't know at any point what they're thinking. And if I was a GM in the league, I would be trying to make moves with them every single time. They're the team I'd be like attacking every single time.
Yep.
If they have something I want, I would feel like I could get it for cheap. If I have something I don't want, I would feel like I could probably dump it to them.
Yeah.
And that's not where you want to be.
No.
Dallas, do you have any stray thoughts on Dallas that we've talked a lot about Dallas at this point. We've done literally 2 podcasts on that deal.
No, I would rather wait till we see it on the court because I'm interested, right? Like we've talked about it. We talked about it at length. I'm not completely out that this could work. The process doesn't make sense. Not trying to justify it. Please don't take what I'm saying the wrong way. I'm just like, okay, can you go all in on defense with these guys? Can Kyrie be enough as the primary? Here's where they didn't go get that. We talked about them needing another primary initiator. They didn't go get one, right? So, Dinwiddie, Exum, those guys, maybe I wrote in my notes the other day, like maybe the combination of Dinwiddie, Exum, Marshall, and Clay's just like off-ball movement gravity is enough to survive the non-Kyrie minutes in terms of that. And I know they'll be 80 staggered. I'll save my thoughts until I see it on the court because I'm truly fascinated to see what it looks like.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that's the winners and losers of the deadline. Last thing that I want to note here, 2 things regarding the Oklahoma City Thunder. First and foremost, AJ Mitchell, 2-year, $6 million contract.
Much deserved.
Much deserved. Has been the best 2-way player in the league this year. Really, really, really looks like a fantastic hit for them in the top 40 of the draft.
Yep.
Second, Chet Holmgren. Looks like he's back, baby.
Yep. I'll be honest.
Injury report for Friday.
Sam, I'm starting to get nervous because like whenever I talk about the Thunder, I'm just like, when they get Chet back. And then all of a sudden I was like, they're getting Chet back, right? Like he's coming back. Like he's going to start playing soon. This is about the right time, right? You get a handful of games in, maybe not a handful, but get some games in before the All-Star break, get a week off, and then come back ready for the stretch run and feel like that's plenty of time to get himself acclimated. I know he's been with the team, but not with iHeart. And so I think it will take them a little bit to figure out, how do we use them together? When do we use them together? How do they play together when they are being used together? Not worried about it, just saying that that is something they'll have to navigate through.
Yep. I think we can do buyout market maybe on like Monday or Sunday when we record, right? Like that's probably the easiest time to talk about that.
Okay.
I think that's all we got here, right? I think we're pretty good. The 76ers signed Chuma Okeke to a 10-day.
Love it.
Good for Chuma getting back to the league. Think that's all we got here.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
Okay. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
At Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on Substack. Again, if your team plays the Pistons, I often have page and a half of notes about your favorite team and what I saw as that game went on. The Pistons Pulse podcast, if you want some Pistons content. Otherwise, the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecenie right here.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We will have a lot of different stuff coming soon over there. I have a big, like 5,000 word column on the deadline that I'm literally finishing right after we get off of this show here. It is 10:45 a.m. in Australia, and the deadline is done. And I'm very, very excited to be able to hopefully stop thinking about the trade machine for another 4 months. Hit the subscribe button on the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecenie YouTube channel. It really helps support the show. Leave a comment, hit the like button, whatever you can to support. It really, really helps. Subscribe over on the podcast feeds. We'll be back on Sunday to break down more. Until next time, we'll talk soon.